Welcome back, Mitchell Mustangs. Thank you for watching this video on Monday, May 18th. So this is our last week of our read aloud together with our mini lesson. We will finish Holes on Thursday. I'm so excited, but a little sad too. I'm always excited to get to the end of a book to find out how everything comes together, but a good book, I miss a little when I finish. So I'll be a little sad on Thursday. So for this week, although week 8 is the last week in our grade book this week, feel free to send your teachers an email. Let your teachers know what you're reading. Choose your best response of 4 and send it along with a score from your rubric. This could be your best piece of writing yet in this online platform. So all of us language arts teachers would love to hear from you this week. If you see a Z in the grade book from any of your teachers, and let's say it was way back at week 4, just send your teacher a reader's response and a score with it. At the very least, just send a score for that week. So don't worry about it. Don't be upset. Just take care of it. So if there's a Z in the grade book, just send a score for that week to your language arts teachers and get those in by Friday. We'll be looking for your emails, and Friday, Saturday, possibly at the latest would be great. So thank you so much, Mitchell Mustangs, for doing that. So it's Monday. We have a riddle from Ms. Rivero. Here's our riddle. What can be driven, although it doesn't have wheels, sliced but stays whole? That's Ms. Rivera's riddle for the week. I wonder who can figure out that riddle. I'll let you know Ms. Rivera's answer on Thursday. So last week, I always watch Mrs. Clifford's videos as well because that's what we do as readers and thinkers is when we're in the face-to-face platform, we turn and talk. We have a partner who we listen to their thoughts and then we respond. So we listen, think, and respond back. And what happens, our ideas, so we think about the plot structure of the rising action. I like to think of that as a staircase where one partner shares some thinking based in text and I'm listening and I think, oh my goodness, and I add to that and we add to each other. So it's like a staircase that we walk up together. So in my family, we have a small ping pong table, and a lot of times you might drop by our house and it's in our foyer. Literally, you ring the doorbell, walk into our house, and sometimes you have to walk around a small ping pong table. We like to play ping pong. So I think reading and learning about themes of books, we're continuing, just like Mrs. Clifford said, that author's purpose. We like to know why people do what they do, don't we? In anything, what we read or even situations. And I always picture a really good conversation is like playing ping pong. So for the best ping pong game to occur, we need 2 players and 2 players that are attentive and paying attention. Otherwise, the ball's going to flop and the game ends right away. So it's super important as a ping pong player to show up with my paddle and pay attention to the game and go back and forth. That's what makes it fun. And when we're reading and talking about books with partners and other people, it's the same thing. It really is so much fun to talk with others about the books that we are reading. And we've done a little bit of this over this online platform. I sort of think about it as if maybe I go up to, in the neighborhood, they have the little tennis wall that you can hit the ball, but there's no one really, you're just playing with against yourself. And that's good. And we've been doing a lot of that in this online platform. But really, I suggest over the summer, why not talk about books that you're reading with your friends? And you can do that on your phones, or you can do that via text messaging and think about the books and build ideas from one another. And possibly this is why I love book clubs so much, and why I love the read aloud is because when we're reading the same book, we see different things, and then we sort of help one another and alert one another to different ideas. So as I'm reading today, I am thinking about what I heard Mrs. Clifford discussing. She said quite a few really important things, but this idea of she pieced everything together. And that's what we do when we figure out the theme or possibly the author's purpose. She looked at important events and she saw a common thread going through all the events of this idea that justice hasn't been served in the past, and will justice be served? I've been thinking about it since Thursday. So as I'm reading today, I'm paying close attention to this theme of justice. And I'm wondering, because I feel like the climax is about to happen, I'm wondering if things will come together, if things will tie together. And I imagine they will. But if they'll tie together and support that big idea that Mrs. Clifford has put out there. So see how we do that? It's almost like playing ping pong. One person, the other person, back and forth, the ideas, paying attention so that ball doesn't drop on the ground, or that idea doesn't go away and drop on the ground and we miss out on thinking about something super important that could possibly help us to live our lives a little bit better. Okay, so let's read. Here we go. Chapter 41. Zero's condition continued to improve. Stanley slowly peeled an onion. He liked eating them one layer at a time. The water hole was now almost as large as the holes he had dug back at Camp Green Lake. It contained almost 2 feet of murky water. Stanley had dug it all himself. Zero had offered to help, but Stanley thought it better for Zero to save his strength. It was a lot harder to dig in water than it was in a dry lake. Stanley was surprised that he himself hadn't gotten sick, either from the sploosh, the dirty water, or from living on onions. He used to get sick quite a lot back at home. Both boys were barefoot. They had washed their socks. All their clothes were very dirty, but their socks were definitely the worst. They didn't dip their socks into the hole, afraid to contaminate the water. Instead, they filled the jars and poured the water over their dirty socks. I didn't go to the homeless shelter very often, Zero said, just if the weather was really bad. I'd have to find someone to pretend to be my mom. If I'd just gone by myself, they would have asked me a bunch of questions. If they'd found out I didn't have a mom, they would have made me a ward of the state. What's a ward of the state? Zero smiled. I don't know, but I didn't like the sound of it. Stanley remembered Mr. Pandansky telling the warden that Zero was a ward of the state. He wondered if Zero knew he'd become one. I liked sleeping outside, said Zero. I used to pretend I was a Cub Scout. I always wanted to be a Cub Scout. I'd see them at the park in their blue uniforms. I was never a Cub Scout, said Stanley. I wasn't good at social stuff like that. Kids made fun of me because I was fat. I liked the blue uniforms, said Zero. Maybe I wouldn't have liked being a Cub Scout. Stanley shrugged one shoulder. My mother was once a Girl Scout, said Zero. I thought you said you didn't have a mother. Well, everybody has a mother. Well, yeah, I know that. She said she once won a prize for selling the most Girl Scout cookies, said Zero. She was real proud of that. Stanley peeled off another layer of his onion. We always took what we needed, Zero said. When I was little, I didn't even know it was stealing. I don't remember when I found out, but we just took what we needed, never more. So when I saw the shoes on display in the shelter, I just reached in the glass case and took them. Clyde Livingston's shoes? Asked Stanley. I didn't know they were his. I just thought they were somebody's old shoes. It was better to take someone's old shoes, I thought, than steal a pair of new ones. I didn't know they were famous. There was a sign, but of course I couldn't read it. Then the next thing I know, everybody's making this big deal about how the shoes are missing. It was kind of funny in a way. The whole place is going crazy. There I was, wearing the shoes, and everyone's running around saying, "What happened to the shoes? The shoes are gone." I just walked out the door. No one noticed me. When I got outside, I ran around the corner and immediately took off the shoes. I put them on top of a parked car. I remember they smelled really bad. "Yeah, those were them," said Stanley. "Did they fit you?" "Pretty much." Stanley remembered being surprised at Clyde Livingston's small shoe size. Stanley's shoes were bigger. Clyde Livingston had small, quick feet. Stanley's feet were big and slow. "I should have just kept them," said Zero. "I'd already made it out of the shelter and everything. I ended up getting arrested the next day when I tried to walk out of a shoe store with a new pair of shoes. If I had just kept those old smelly sneakers, then neither of us would be here right now." Chapter 42. Zero became strong enough to help dig the hole. When he finished, it was over 6 feet deep. He filled the bottom with rocks to help separate the water from the dirt. He was still the best hole digger around. "That's the last hole I will ever dig," he declared, throwing down the shovel. Stanley smiled. He wished it were true, but he knew they had no choice but to eventually return to Camp Green Lake. They couldn't live on onions forever. They had been completely around Big Thumb. It was like a giant sundial. They followed the shade. They were able to see all out in all directions. There was no place to go. The mountain was surrounded by desert. Zero stared at Big Thumb. "It must have a hole in it," he said, "filled with water." "You think?" "Where else could the water be coming from?" Zero asked. "Water doesn't run uphill." Stanley bit into an onion. It didn't burn his eyes or nose, and in fact, he no longer noticed a particularly strong taste. He remembered when he had first carried Zero up the hill how the air had smelled bitter. It was the smell of thousands of onions growing and rotting and sprouting. Now he didn't smell a thing. "How many onions do you think we've eaten?" he asked. Zero shrugged. "I don't even know how long we've been here." "I'd say about a week," said Stanley. "And we probably each eat about 20 onions a day, so that's 280 onions," said Zero. Stanley smiled. "I bet we really stink." 2 nights later, Stanley lay awake staring up at the star-filled sky. He was too happy to fall asleep. He knew he had no reason to be happy. He had heard or read somewhere that right before a person freezes to death, he suddenly feels nice and warm. He wondered if perhaps he was experiencing something like that. It occurred to him that he couldn't remember the last time he felt happiness. It wasn't just being sent to Camp Green Lake that had made his life miserable. Before that, he'd been unhappy at school, where he had no friends and bullies like Derek Dunn picked on him. No one liked him, and the truth was, he didn't especially like himself. He liked himself now. He wondered if he was delirious. He looked over at Zero sleeping near him. Zero's face was lit in the starlight, and there was a flower petal in front of his nose that moved back and forth as he breathed. It reminded Stanley of something out of a cartoon. Zero breathed in, and the petal was drawn up, almost touching his nose. Zero breathed out, and the petal moved toward his chin. It stayed on Zero's face for an amazingly long time before fluttering off to the side. Stanley considered placing it back in front of Zero's nose, but it wouldn't be the same. It seemed like Zero had lived at Camp Green Lake forever. But as Stanley thought about it now, he realized that Zero must have gotten there no more than a month or 2 before him. Zero was actually arrested a day later, but Stanley's trial kept getting delayed because of baseball. He remembered what Zero had said a few days before. If Zero had just kept those shoes, then neither of them would be here right now. As Stanley stared at the glittering night sky, he thought there was no place he would rather be. He was glad Zero put the shoes on the parked car. He was glad they fell from the overpass and hit him on the head. When the shoes first fell from the sky, he remembered thinking that destiny had struck him. Now he thought so again. It was more than a coincidence. It had to be destiny. Maybe they wouldn't have to return to Camp Green Lake, he thought. Maybe they could make it past the camp, then follow the dirt road back to civilization. They could fill the sack with onions and the 3 jars with water, and he had his canteen as well. They could refill their jars and canteen at the camp, maybe sneak into the kitchen and get some food. He doubted any counselors were still on guard. Everyone had to think they were dead. Buzzard food. It would mean living the rest of his life as a fugitive. The police would always be after him. At least he could call his parents and tell them he was still alive. But he couldn't go visit them in case the police were watching the apartment. Although, if everyone thought he was dead, they wouldn't bother to watch the apartment. He would have to somehow get a new identity. Now, I'm really thinking crazy, he thought. He wondered if a crazy person wonders if he's crazy. But even as he thought this, an even crazier idea kept popping into his head. He knew it was too crazy to even consider. Still, if he was going to be a fugitive for the rest of his life, it would help to have some money. Perhaps a treasure chest full of money. "You're crazy," he said to himself. Besides, just because he found a lipstick container with KB on it, that didn't mean there was treasure buried there. It was crazy. It was all part of his crazy feeling of happiness. Or maybe it was destiny. He reached over and shook Zero's arm. "Hey, Zero," he whispered. "Huh," Zero muttered. "Zero, wake up." "What?" Zero raised up his head. "What is it?" "You want to dig one more hole?" Stanley asked him. Chapter 43. "We weren't always homeless," Zero said. "I remember a yellow room." "How old were you when you—" Stanley started to ask, but he couldn't find the right words. "Moved out?" "I don't know. I must have been real little because I don't remember too much. I don't remember moving out. I remember standing in a crib with my mother singing to me. She held my wrists and made my hands clap together. She used to sing that song to me. That one you sang. It was a little different though." Zero spoke slowly, as if searching his brain for memories and clues. "And then, later, I know we lived on the street, but I don't know why we left the house. I'm pretty sure it was a house and not an apartment. I know my room was yellow." It was late afternoon. They were resting in the shadow of the thumb. They had spent the morning picking onions and putting them in the sack. It didn't take long, but long enough so that they had to wait another day before heading down the mountain. They wanted to leave at the first hint of daylight so they'd have plenty of time to make it to Camp Green Lake before dark. Stanley wanted to be sure he could find the right hole. Then they would hide by it until everyone went to sleep. They would dig for as long as it seemed safe and not a second longer. And then, treasure or no treasure, they'd head up the dirt road. If it was absolutely safe, they'd try to steal some food and water from the camp kitchen. "I'm good at sneaking in and out of places," Zero had said. "Remember," Stanley had warned, "the door to the rec room squeaks." Now, he lay on his back, trying to save his strength for the long days ahead. He wondered what happened to Zero's parents, but he didn't ask. Zero didn't like answering questions. It was better to just let him think and talk when he felt like it. Stanley thought about his own parents. In his last letter, his mom was worried that they might be evicted from their apartment because of the smell of burning sneakers. They could easily become homeless as well. Again, he wondered if they'd been told that he ran away from camp. Were they told that he was dead? An image appeared in his head of his parents hugging each other and crying. He tried not to think about it. Instead, he tried to recapture the feelings he'd had the night before, the inexplicable feelings of happiness, the sense of destiny. But those feelings didn't return. He just felt scared. Oh, Mitchell Mustangs, we are going to stop there today. I want to just bring up what Mrs. Clifford said in her video as well. She quoted the book, "When you spend your whole life living in a hole, the only way is out is to go up." So I'm thinking about this idea of justice. I'm thinking about how they're going to go back and look for a treasure. Wow, Stanley really is evolving. He is developing. There's tension here. I'm so excited to see the next level. And what I'd say to Mrs. Clifford is, it looks like he's climbing out of that hole, because it looks like he's doing things that he never dreamed that he would have the courage to do, to go after Zero. I wonder if Stanley will be the one to set some of these things right if he finds the treasure. Lots of things to think about. Thank you so much, Mitchell Mustangs. The last thing I want to say to you is stay healthy, happy reading, happy writing, and thank you.